My name is Sally Nilsson and I am autistic and ADHD. I'm also a published author, psychotherapist, coach, podcast host, mum and wife. I've always been autistic and ADHD. I was born this way and I will die this way. This is my natural difference, my own unique neurotype. I can look around my family tree and see my children, my parents, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and even a great-grandparent who are so like me. When one of our sons was 10, he was having difficulties at school, so I took him to see a child psychologist and he was diagnosed with auditory processing disorder. I now know that I was like this too when I was 10, and I still am. APD means I have difficulty following multiple instructions and understanding meaning in certain things. Turns out my son is also ADHD. Note, I don't say he has ADHD, as this is every much a part of him, as being autistic is for me. Autistic people often prefer first-person language, so I say I am autistic rather than I have autism. So this is the case for many parents. We discover that our children are having challenges and that they are on a spectrum, and then we see traits within ourselves too. I was only diagnosed autistic in 2021, aged 56, and that is a big story in its own way. It was right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, as has been the experience of so many others. I'm not diagnosed ADHD because I know who I am and I don't need that piece of paper. This whole experience has been my special interest and I have researched intensively. Diagnosis can lead to being prescribed medication and often much needed support. I don't want medication and I have a great support network. This is a personal choice. Many people find meds a great help, whether for ADHD or for anxiety and depression. It is common for neurodivergent people to suffer mental illness when they live in a world that does not understand them. I had no idea I was neurodivergent before the age of 55. Neurodivergence includes autism, ADHD, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dyslexia, Tourette's and OCD. More spectrums can be added under the umbrella of neurodiversity, like sensory processing disorder, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, tics, anxiety, and more. All my life I felt different. As a child, I ate non-food items like my hair, rubber bands, pencils, mud, grass, and brick. I loved to be by myself, especially playing at office and post office. These were games, not the toy ones. It had to be the proper stuff. At age 7, I was a voracious reader. At 12, I carried around a small typewriter to write stories and my diary. School was very tough. If I didn't like the subject being taught, I would fidget and get distracted, or I would ask countless questions. The other children got into play groups on the first day and I missed that opportunity, so I was like a butterfly flitting from one group to another. I began masking my true self from age 8. I mimicked others and mirrored behaviours to try to fit in, and it rarely worked. In order to have any chance of feeling like I belonged, I became the clown. I made people laugh by singing, talking gobbledygook and impersonating our teachers and favourite film and pop stars. I had 3 special friends and we were all outliers. Primary school was fun. I loved music, gymnastics, drama, English and crafts. Secondary school was awful. The rules of the game changed so much, and when puberty set in, I didn't have a clue. Many autistic and ADHD children are immature. We often like to be with people older or younger than ourselves, and lots of us are mad about animals. Animals don't judge. I was bullied terribly, like lots of other people. It would be decades later before I realised how strong all that bullying was to make me. Some folks think autists lack empathy. Some of us do. For many of us, it's the complete opposite. We have too much empathy and we can sense other people's moods. We are often very spiritual and have deep intuition. Many of us are psychics. It is this compassion that enables many autistic people to go into the healthcare professions, but it can be exhausting. So can masking. We are often visual thinkers and pattern matching detectives, so you'll find us in the justice system too. I have such a deep need for fairness and justice. If I see that someone or a minority group are having a hard time, I'll be straight in there and have run various campaigns throughout my life for one cause or another. Neurodivergent people often can have unique abilities, and we can be gifted, creative, analytical, and a great asset. We can also have challenges. I've always had a fascination with people, the way they behave, talk, dress, and communicate with each other. Even as a young child, I was a mini psychologist. I did not communicate like other folk. I spoke a different language. I know now that this is called the double empathy problem created by Damien Milton, and that is why so many autistic people find talking to neurotypicals so hard. It's like we're a different culture. I'm fluent in autism and I speak pidgin neurotypical. Neurotypicals are people who make up the predominant neurotype in the population. There are roughly 80% who are neurotypical and 20% neurodiverse. It is thought that there are around 700,000 autistic people in the UK, and they're just the ones we know about. There's likely to be many thousands more. This is the same with ADHD people, thought to be 3 million, probably many, many more unknowingly in circulation. We are seeing so many more children and adults presenting as ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder does not describe us correctly. We don't have a deficit of attention. We have too much of it a lot of the time, and sometimes absolutely none. Edward Halliwell described this as us like having brains like a Ferrari that has bicycle brakes. And you can read his fantastic book, ADHD 2.0. So many ADHD children find school, the curriculum, and the whole education system extremely challenging. For this reason, many parents are homeschooling their children, meaning they have to stop work. This is taking many out of the workforce, which, in the long run, cannot be a good thing. Figures say that 30% of the prison population are ADHD. My research, and from talking to people who have worked in prisons, say that the percentage is most likely closer to 70 or even 80%. Back in the 70s and 80s, when I was growing up, we barely talked about mental health, let alone neurodiversity. We just got on with it. I felt like an alien. Much of the time it was like I was in a bubble with the world going on around me. Sometimes it felt like I was on a bullet train that never slowed down enough to stop for me to get off at stations. Life was relentless. I thought I was mentally ill. Autistic and ADHD people are not mentally ill, but often we are told that we are, and that's called gaslighting. We go through life not fitting in, not getting on with people, having a hard time at home, at school and in the workplace. In fact, 20% of autistic people are not working. This is shocking because so many can and want to work. Sometimes all we need are a few basic accommodations. You may have heard of high functioning and low functioning autism. Our community doesn't like those terms. This can be because often we have a spiky profile. This means that we can do some things well some of the time and not so well at other times. Of course, some autistic people are very much disabled, especially when they also have severe learning difficulties or brain illness or injury, and have had traumatic births. And it's okay to be disabled. We need support a lot of the time. What do you think of when you think about an autistic person? Do you think of Rain Man, or a boy rocking, hitting himself, or having a meltdown in a supermarket? I thought of that too, once upon a time. I was ableist and judgmental until I educated myself and walked amongst neurodivergent folks. People might say, "You don't look autistic." Well, I would say back, "You do look allistic," meaning non-autistic. Or some might say, "We're all a bit on the spectrum, aren't we?" And I might say, "Well, you could well be on the neurotypical spectrum." So no, we are not all a bit on the spectrum. My life is completely different now. I know who I really am, my authentic self. I have been a counsellor for 7 years. For the past 2 years, I've gone niche and now only work with neurodivergent clients. I work in private practice and feel so rewarded that I work with my tribe. I feel like I've come home. So what can we all do to support our families when they are neurodivergent? Well, we can go right back to basics. We can educate ourselves. There is a plethora of books, podcasts, articles, and news stories about autism, ADHD, and other spectrums. For parents who think that their young children are not progressing like their peers, making friends, or seem to appear different, either overstimulated or withdrawn, there are resources. From playgroup to university, support is there. The more we learn, the more we can help those we love. What about the difference in presentation between boys and girls? In years gone by, autism and ADHD was thought of as being much more common in boys. In more recent times, the ratio is considered to be more like 3 boys to every 1 girl. In ADHD, boys are commonly hyperactive, whereas girls may be more inattentive. In autism, the boys used to be considered little professors and girls are psychologists, but these are somewhat generalizations. Girls and boys can present in similar ways as well. You may have heard the phrase, "When you've met one autistic, you've met one autistic." Each spectrum is wide and colourful with very many traits. We use the term traits rather than symptoms because we are not ill or diseased. People can so often have multiple neurodivergences, like autism with dyspraxia or ADHD with tics. We might have anxiety and depression. We might have physical ailments and illnesses because of all the trauma and stress that we've been under. So it's as wide as it is long. With neurodiversity comes mental health. Remember when I said that being autistic or ADHD is not a mental illness? Well, it isn't in itself, but we can all become unwell when our needs are not being met. People can become unwell when they are exposed to too much stress. There might be overwhelming sensory input. The environment can be too bright, too loud, or have too many people in it invading our space. There can be too many instructions given, too high expectations, and lots of criticism and rejection. We have big feelings, both emotional and physical, and they can be too much for us sometimes. Our neuro tribe is incredibly sensitive. It is as if we live in a high definition world and everything is extremely vivid. So, how can we do more to help? Firstly, we can listen, actively listen, not to jump in with solutions or advice. Many of us need to do things our own way. We're not stupid and we want to be independent like anyone else. We just need to be asked what we need to feel comfortable, and if we can, we'll tell you. Next is for people to validate our experiences. Please believe us when we say we aren't feeling safe, that we don't want to sit at the dinner table with food we don't like, or many questions being fired at us, or that we need to be alone for a while to decompress, especially after school. For girls and women, we have an extra dimension that make our lives even more challenging. The fact that many of us bear children. This means that hormones, especially estrogen, plays a large part in why we can suffer more than the lads. Puberty, childbirth and menopause heaps on more sensory difficulties. Many neurodivergent girls have PMDD, which is an extreme form of premenstrual tension. Endometriosis is also common. There is so much more to talk about for girls and women than there used to be. Sex and gender differences, eating disorders and anorexia for autistic girls, relationships and the workplace. I'd like to talk to you more, if I may, in future videos, so please stay tuned and I'll tell you more about my own journey and how we can all advocate for our amazing neurodiverse community. Thank you. Bye for now.